We continue now at the top of Daf Zayin Amud Aleph and Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 27a. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah had said that let's say you have a situation of a wife that is taken captive, and the reason why she's taken is for money reasons, because they want the husband to pay them some money. So we said over there that you can assume she was not violated, and therefore she is going to be kashera to her husband. And Rav said on the Mishnah that's only true in a situation where the Jewish government is the dominant government, but if the Jewish government is subservient to the non-Jewish government, so in that case you have to assume that she was violated. And so the Gemara asked a question on Rav from the Mishnah in Edyus. The Mishnah in Edyus said you have a situation in Ashkelon. Now Ashkelon, the Gemara points out, is a place where the non-Jewish government is dominant. And it said over there that if you have Eidim that she wasn't violated, so you assume she was not violated. And the Gemara here says, Hurhana in. That whole case over there was specifically Hurhana, where she's taken as a collateral. And Rashi over here explains, Hurhana midas, she was taken midas, became a digiazman velo niftis. In other words, she was taken, and they essentially said you have to redeem her. If you don't redeem her, so then we're going to keep her. And that's exactly what happened. She was taken and she wasn't redeemed. So harei shalov de kochavim b'dineim. So then they justly have taken her, and there's a real concern over here she was violated. Mishum hachi ba'inon eidim idin osa shalonistra. That's why the Mishnah in Edyus is saying there have to be witnesses saying that she wasn't taken into seclusion. Hurana in, but nech b'shalo. But if she was imprisoned, as Rashi over here says, nech b'shalo nechletes lehem. It's not a situation where she wasn't redeemed at the proper time, and therefore she's being kept justly. So they're lo ba'inon eidim. There apparently you do not require witnesses. Hoel va'al mamanu. Since it's a situation where it was only done for money. In other words, they're not taking her justly, and they are not going to violate her in that situation. And you don't even need witnesses. You can assume they're not going to violate, even though it's a situation where the non-Jewish government is dominant. That seems to go against what Rav says. And so the Gemara says, Hu adin afilo nechbesha. Really, the situation is, the Mishnah over there in Edyus would have even been true had she been imprisoned. The same halacha would be true. You would not automatically assume she was not violated. She might have been violated, because it's a not-Jewish government. It just happens to be the case over there was Hurana. That was the case that they were testifying about over there in Edyus, but it would have been true the other way as well. And the Gemara continues, Ika Diamri, there some who have a different version. It's not that Rava was asking a question from the Mishnah in Edyus and Rav, but rather he was bringing a support. Amar Rava says, Afano Nami Tanina, we have a Mishnah in Edyus that says the same thing. It proves like what Rav is saying. Hey, Rav Yossi HaKohen, Rav Zechariah ben HaKatzov, Rav Yossi HaKohen and Rav Zechariah ben HaKatzov, they testified, Al Bas Yisrael Shehurana Ba'ashkelon. Again, there was a daughter of Israel, there was a Jewish girl who was taken as a collateral in Ashkelon, V'richgua, b'nei Mishpachta, and the people of her family, they distanced themselves from her, they assumed she was violated. And then the Eidim, the witnesses came in and said, no, she was not taken into seclusion, she was not violated. And the Chachamim said, if we believe the witnesses, Shehurana, that she was taken as collateral, so Haminu, Shalonistr v'Shalonitzma, we should also believe she wasn't taken into seclusion and she was not violated. And if we don't believe that she was not taken into seclusion and she was not violated, so Al Ta'aminu Shurana, we shouldn't even believe that she was ever taken as collateral. In other words, either way, she should remain kashera. And so according to this version, Ashkelon Da'al Yedei Mamanu, Da'al Yedei Maman Hava rather, the proof is as follows. By the case of Ashkelon, it was just a monetary situation. It was just like our Mishnah. And the only reason that we assume she was not violated is because witnesses say she was not violated. But if there were no witnesses on her side, so lo, then apparently it would be a support for what Rav says. We would not believe it. We would say she was violated because it's a situation where the non-Jewish government is dominant. And the Gemara says, my lav is it not? Loshna hurana v'loshna nechbesha. It doesn't make a difference if she was taken justly as a collateral. It doesn't make a difference if she was imprisoned. And so therefore, again, that would be evidence to what Rav is saying. And the Gemara says, lo, no, hurana shani. It's different by hurana, because again, when she's taken in a sort of just fashion, so then there really is a concern and we need witnesses. But it could very well be if she was imprisoned, they would not want to violate her again because they're trying to collect their money. And so therefore, it's not necessarily a proof for Rav. And the Gemara continues, Ika de Rami la Mirma. There are some people who just say it's a contradiction in Mishnayos, and they don't have it as a question or a support from Rav at all. They bring it independently as a question against the two Mishnayos. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Al Yedei Mamon Muteris Labal. It says that if it's a money situation, she's permitted to her husband. Or a minute, we have a contradiction. Heyed Reb Yossi v'chulu. Again, that's the case of Ashkelon over there. Va Ashkelon de Al Yedei Mamon. By Ashkelon also it was a money situation. The Katani, and it says, Taima de Edim Mi'idin Mosa, that the only reason she's permitted is because there are witnesses. Ha'ein Edim Mi'idin Mosa, but if there are no witnesses, then apparently not. So apparently from that Mishnah, you require witnesses. It's not automatically assumed that she was not violated. Umeshani, and then according to this version, the answer is, Amar of Shmuel Bar Rav Yitzchak, or Shmuel Bar Rav Yitzchak says, Lokash is not difficult. Kan, Sheyad Yisrael Tekifa Alov de Kochav. It depends. Here we're talking about a situation where the Jewish government is stronger. If the Jewish government is stronger, there's less chance that she was violated. Kan Sheyad de Kochavim Tekifa Al Atzma. But if you have a situation where the non-Jewish government is stronger, so in that situation there actually is a concern. That's a situation of Ashkelon, even though it's Al Yedei Mammon, but over there you're going to need Eidim because again, the non-Jewish government is dominant in that situation. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Al Yedei Nefashos Asura V'chulu. It said if they were taken for a capital offense, then the women are prohibited because it's assumed that they were violated. Amar Rav says, Kagon Neshei Ganvi, for example, let's say you have the wives of thieves, Rashi will explain. V'Levi Amar Kagon Ishto Shel Ben Donoi. Levi says, for example, the wife of Ben Donoi. Again, Rashi will explain that as well. Amar Chizkiah says, V'husha Nigmar Dinan Lahariga. This halacha that we assume they're violated is only true if there was a Gemar Din that these people should be executed. Rabbi Yochanan says, Afal Bishalon Nigmar Dinan Lahariga. Even if there was not a Gemar Din, even if there was not a final verdict that they should be executed, still there's a concern that these wives were violated. We'll take a look at Rashi over here. Hani Neshei de Ganvi, the wives of thieves. Shabalei and Nitalin. The case would be that their husbands were hung. B'derech hamalchus lahafker beisamun Neshei. And it was the practice of the government to make their houses and their wives hefker. And so again, there's a concern that the wives were violated in this case. Ben Donoi, what's Ben Donoi? Rotzeachai, he was a murderer. Ve'elazar Shemo, his name was Elazar. Kidamrinim and Perak Egel Arufa. That's found in Mesechet Sota. Avon Neshei de Ganvi hagon v'maman lo mifkri. According to this opinion, it's only a situation of a wife of a Rotzeach, of a murderer, but if you're just the wife of a thief, according to this opinion, that would not be enough, then we would not assume that she was made hefker, we would not assume that she was violated. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Ir shechavshuha charkam kol kohanos shenimsu b'socha psulos. Let's say you have a situation of a city that there was a siege that was laid to the city, so all of the women that are married to Kohanim, they become disqualified because we assume that they may have been raped, and therefore again they're disqualified to their husbands. Now if they have witnesses that say they were not violated, even if the witness is a slave or is a maidservant, they are going to be believed. However, a person is not believed about himself, so if the women would say that they were not raped, they would not be believed to testify on themselves. And Rashi over here says, Charkom, again, Motzer, it's a siege, and Pesulos, again, the wives of Kohanim are going to be disqualified, Asuros Lebale, and they're usher to their husbands. The Eishes Kohen, Asur Ba'onis, because the wife of a Kohen, even if she's raped, she becomes usher to the Kohen. And the Gemara says, Uraminu, we have the following contradiction from a Mishnah. It says, Balshas Shabol, let's say you have an army that attacks a city, B'shaz Shalom, if it's a time of peace, so Chevios Psuchos Asuros, so if you have barrels of wine that are open, so then they become prohibited. It's assumed that they may have poured that wine to Avodah Zarah. Stumos mutaros, but if they're sealed barrels, it's going to be mutar. B'shas milchama, now if it's a time of war, elu ve'elu mutaros, all of the barrels are going to be mutaros. Lefisha ein pnai lenasich, because there's not enough time when you're in a war to pour, to do these libations to avodah zarah. So you see from this Mishnah that we're actually lenient. We say that in a time of war, there's not enough time. Whereas again, in our Mishnah, it seems to be if there's a siege, if there's a time of war, the women are going to be violated. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Mori says, Livol yesh penai. In order to violate a woman, there's enough time for that. That there's a concern even in a time of war. Lenasech, but to pour a libation to avodah zarah, ein penai. For that, there's not enough time. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Elazar mishmei de Chizkiah, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Elazar in the name of Chizkiah, he says, Kan becharkom shalosa malchus. In one case, we're talking about a siege of the very same government. So they're not going to violate the women over there. There you can be lenient not only by the wine, you can even be lenient by the women. And Kan, but in our Mishnah, becharkom shal malchus acheres, we're talking about a situation where it's a foreign government that's attacking. There you have a situation where you do have to be concerned that the women were violated. As Rashi over here says, first answer was livol yesh penai, to violate the women. There is enough time. To talk of lu yitzrayim, there's more of a yetzer hara for that. So even in a time of war, that is a concern. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar says, Af be'ila pa'amim shein mutaros. Even when it comes to violating the women, sometimes we are lenient. And when would that be charkom shel osa malchus? If it's the same government that's laying siege, what that means to say is, Eino rotze lahashchas es b'nei ha'ir. Let's say you have a situation where the army that's coming in, they don't want to destroy the city. For example, let's say it's a government that's coming to expand the territory a little, and they want to just take over this city, and that city will pay taxes. There, they are not going to violate violate the women, so there you can be more lenient. But the Gemara continues, Shalosa Malchus Nami, but even if it's the same government that's coming in, Efshar de lo Arak, some of the gears of de lo Akar Chad Minayu, it's impossible, at least one of the soldiers must have come and violated one of the women. How come there's no concern in that case? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yudah Mar Shmuel, Rav Yudah says in the name of Shmuel, Kishemishmaros roos zuazu. It's a situation where you have people watching, they're on guard, there are shifts that are watching one another, they're making sure that no one does any damage to this city. But the Gemara still says, Efshar de lo naim, of course, isn't it possible? It's impossible that they're not going to sleep a little. Even the people who are on shift, who are on guard, they're going to fall asleep. Still, there should be a concern. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Levi. Rabbi Levi says, the case is that they're surrounding the city with shushilta, v'kalba, v'gavza, v'avza. They're surrounding the city with chains and with dogs and with branches and with geese. In other words, these are going to make a lot of noise. Anyone who tries to enter into the city to do damage to the city, there's going to be noise. It's going to wake people up. And again, it's going to be impossible for them to do any of this damage, and that's why there's no concern. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Abba bar Zavda. Rabbi Abba bar Zavda says, Pligi bar Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya v'Rabbanan. There was a machlokas about this issue between Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya and the Rabbanan. Chadamar, one of them says, Kan mecharkom shalosa malchus, kan mecharkom shal malchus acheres. Again, like the answer we said before, in one case we're talking about where it is the same government that is entering the city, and therefore there is less concern that damage will be done to the city. And in the other Mishnah, we're talking about a foreign government that's coming in, so there's more concern that there will be damage to the city. Velo kasha le velo midi, and this particular opinion had no question at all. I said this is a sufficient answer to say that in one Mishnah we're talking about a foreign government, and the other we're talking about the same government. V'chad, but one of them, kasha le kolhani, had all of these questions that we just asked. Mishani, and answers like we answered, could go into mahadr le lamasa, shushilta v'kalba v'gavza v'yavza. The case is, when they surround the city with these chains and the dogs and the branches and the geese, and so again there's going to be noise if anyone goes in there and tries to cause damage or tries to violate someone, and therefore that will prevent that from happening. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravidi bar Avin, Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Ashion. Ravidi bar Avin says in the name of Rav Yitzchak bar Ashion, Im yeshav machboa achas. Let's say in this city there's one hideaway, there's an area where a woman could have protected herself. Matzelas ala kahanos kulat. So all of these women that are married to Kohanim, they're all saved because of that. We assume they were not violated because they may have hid out in that hideaway. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah asks, Eina machzekes ala achas ma. What if this area to hide only holds one person? What's the halacha? Mi amrinan, do we say, Kol chada v'chada hainua? Every single individual woman, that was the woman that might have been saved. She might have hid, and therefore everyone is going to be permitted. Odil, or maybe lo amrinan, we don't say that. And so the Gemara says, Umayishna mishnei shvilin. But what's the difference between this case and we have another case of two paths? Echad tameh ve'echad tar. You have two paths. On one of them there's tumah, and one of them there's no tumah, it's pure. V'alach be'echad mehen, and somebody walks on one of the paths, v'yasa taharos, and then he deals with things that are pure. Uba chaveiro v'halach b'sheni, and his friend goes and walks on the second path, v'yasa taharos, and also deals with things that are pure. So we know for sure one of them went on an impure path. So what's the halach over here? Rabbi Yehuda says, Nishal zebif ne'atzmo, the zebif ne'atzmo, if each one asks the shaila independently, each one comes and asks the question independent of the other, so tahoro shneim, so then they're both going to be pure. But ka'achas, but if it's together, tameos, then we have to rule that they are tamei. Rabbi Yossi says, bein kach uvein kach tamein, in both situations, they are tamei. V'yomar Rava v'teim Rabbi Yochanan, and Rava says on this Mishnah, and some people say it's Rabbi Yochanan that says on this Mishnah, explains the machlokas tanaim as follows. That actually, if they come at the same time, everybody agrees they're tamei. And bazachar, then if they come at different times, divrei hakol tahorim, everybody agrees that they're tahor, they're pure. Lo nachliku ela beboli shal olav yal chaver. The real machlokas tanaim over here between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda is, let's say one of them comes to ask about himself and his friend. Mar medami leila bebasachas. One compares that to coming at the same time, and they're both going to be tamei. Umar medami leila bazachar, and the other one compares it to a situation of zeh achar zeh, and in that case again, they're both going to be tahor. And so the Gemara now extends this to our case. V'achanami here also. Kaven d'shari luhu l'kulu. Since over here you're trying to use one hideaway to permit all of the women, kibasachas dami, it should be similar to basachas, and therefore they should all be considered violated, that they should all be considered that they are prohibited. But the Gemara says, Hachiyashta, what kind of comparison is this? Hasam vadaika tum, over there by the paths, there for sure is somebody who is tummy, there's no doubt. One walked on one, the other walked on the other. But over here by the women in the city, miyemar de'itmi, do we know for certain that any of them have been violated? It's possible that none of them were violated. And therefore there's more reason to be lenient in our situation. And the Gemara continues, Boy Ravashi asks, Amr, let's say a woman says, Lo nichbeisi, I didn't hide, V'lo nitzmeisi, but I wasn't violated. So what's the halacha in that case? Mi amrinon, do we say? In that case, there is a possibility, again, that there's like a pesha asr, pesha hitter, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis.